The wind howled through the pines, sharp and cold, as if it knew the secret I carried. My boots crunched against the rocky trail, each step heavier than the last, while Ethan's laughter echoed ahead, carefree, oblivious. I'd loved him for years, and this mountain, our escape from the world, was about to unravel everything. My name is Lucas Bennett, 25, a graphic designer from Denver with a knack for overthinking and a heart that's been quietly breaking since high school. Ethan Caldwell, my best friend since we were 15, is the opposite, a 27-year-old firefighter, all muscle and confidence, with a grin that could charm a grizzly bear. Straight as an arrow, or so I thought. We'd planned this week-long trek through the Colorado Rockies as a break from our chaotic lives, him from the firehouse, me from deadlines and the ache of unrequited love. The trail was brutal, a winding beast called the Silverthorn Pass, known for its steep climbs and unpredictable weather. Day one was all adrenaline. Ethan led the way, his broad shoulders cutting through the morning mist, while I trailed behind, stealing glances at him. His black hair stuck to his forehead, damp from effort, and his blue eyes sparkled with that reckless joy I adored. "Come on, Luke. Keep up," he called, tossing a stick at me playfully. I laughed, but my chest tightened. How do you tell your best friend you're in love with him when he's never shown a hint of feeling the same? By noon, we'd reached a small clearing, a patch of flat ground surrounded by towering evergreens. Ethan dropped his pack and stretched, his shirt riding up to reveal a sliver of tanned skin. I looked away, pretending to study the map. "We're making good time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Camp here tonight." "Perfect," Ethan replied, already rummaging for the tent. As we set up, the air grew heavy with the scent of pine and impending rain. We worked in sync, like always, him hammering stakes, me threading poles. It was easy, familiar, but every brush of his arm against mine sent a jolt through me. I wondered if he noticed how I lingered, how my hands shook when he got too close. That night, we sat by a crackling fire, the sky a deep indigo above us. Ethan passed me a flask of whiskey, his fingers grazing mine. "To adventure," he toasted, his voice warm. I took a swig, the burn grounding me. We talked about everything: his latest call at the fire station, my botched client project, the time we snuck into a concert at 17. But as the fire died down, the conversation turned quiet, heavy. "Luke," Ethan said, staring into the embers, "you ever feel like you're hiding something from the world?" His tone was soft, almost vulnerable, so unlike the Ethan I knew. My heart raced. Was this it? Did he know? I swallowed hard, choosing my words carefully. "Every day," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, his hands behind his head, staring at the stars. "Yeah," he said finally. "Sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I didn't have to be me." I wanted to ask what he meant, to spill everything: how I'd loved him since the day he punched a bully for me in 10th grade. How every laugh, every touch, was both a gift and a wound. But fear clamped my mouth shut. Instead, I changed the subject, pointing out constellations I barely knew. He laughed, and the moment passed, but his words lingered like smoke. The next morning, the trail grew steeper, the air thinner. Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual banter replaced by long stretches of silence. I caught him watching me a few times, his expression unreadable. By midday, we reached a narrow ridge with a sheer drop on one side. The wind screamed, tugging at our packs. "Careful," Ethan said, grabbing my arm as I stumbled. His grip was firm, his eyes locked on mine for a beat too long. My pulse pounded, Not from the height. Thanks, I muttered, pulling away, my skin burning where he'd touched me. We kept moving, but something had shifted. The mountain wasn't just testing our strength, it was testing us. As the sun dipped low, we found a sheltered spot to camp. Ethan built the fire while I cooked, the routine grounding us. But as we ate, a distant rumble echoed through the valley. A storm was coming. We'll be fine, Ethan said, but his eyes darted to the darkening sky. I nodded, trying to ignore the storm brewing inside me. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd tell him. Or maybe the mountain would decide for us. The storm hit at midnight. A beast of wind and rain that tore at our tent like it wanted to rip us apart. Lightning cracked, illuminating Ethan's face as he sat up, his jaw tight. Luke, we gotta reinforce the stakes, he shouted over the roar. We scrambled outside, the rain pelting us like bullets. My hands fumbled with the ropes, slick and cold, while Ethan worked with the calm precision of someone used to chaos. Over here, he called, his voice steady despite the gale. I envied that about him, his ability to stay grounded when the world fell apart. By the time we crawled back into the tent, we were soaked, shivering, and laughing like idiots. That was insane, Ethan said, peeling off his drenched jacket. His shirt clung to his chest, and I forced myself to look away, focusing on wringing out my hat. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now. He was close, his knee brushing mine in the cramped tent. Yeah, I lied, my heart hammering. Just cold. He tossed me a dry shirt from his pack. Put this on. You're gonna freeze. His tone was gruff, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made my chest ache. I changed quickly, hyper-aware of his presence, the air thick with unspoken things. The storm raged on, but inside the tent, it was just us, the patter of rain, and the weight of what we weren't saying. I wanted to tell him then, to let the truth spill out like the rain outside, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, we talked about nothing, old movies, bad pizza, anything to fill the silence. Morning brought a fragile calm. The trail was a muddy mess, but the sky was clear, the mountains glowing under a fresh layer of mist. Ethan was back to his usual self, cracking jokes as we packed up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. He kept glancing at me, his smiles fleeting, like he was wrestling with something too. We pushed deeper into the Rockies, the trail narrowing as it wound through a dense forest. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the world felt impossibly small, just me, Ethan, and the secrets we carried. By noon, we reached a small alpine lake, its surface like glass, reflecting the jagged peaks above. Let's swim, Ethan said suddenly, dropping his pack. Before I could protest, he was stripping down to his boxers, his grin daring me to follow. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't back down. Not with him looking at me like that. The water was freezing, a shock to every nerve. Ethan splashed me, laughing, and for a moment, it was just us, two kids messing around like we were back in high school. But when he swam closer, his shoulder brushing mine, the air shifted. His laughter faded, and his eyes locked on mine, intense, searching. Luke, he started, his voice low. There's something I need to. A sharp crack interrupted him, a branch snapping in the woods. We froze, scanning the trees. Probably just a deer, Ethan said, but his tone was uneasy. We climbed out, drying off quickly, the moment broken. That night, we camped by the lake, the fire casting shadows on Ethan's face. He was quieter again, poking at the flames with a stick. You ever think about running away? He asked out of nowhere. Like, leaving everything behind and just starting over. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Sometimes, I said, but I'd miss you too much. It was the closest I'd come to saying it, and his eyes flicked to mine, sharp and unreadable. Yeah, he said softly. Me too. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. I wanted to push, to ask what he meant, but fear held me back. Instead, we sat in silence, the crackle of the fire louder than our thoughts. The next day, the trail grew treacherous, a rocky ascent that demanded focus. Ethan was ahead, his movements sure, but I could feel the tension between us, like a rope stretched too tight. At one point, he reached back to help me over a steep boulder, his hand lingering on mine. You good? He asked, his voice rough. I nodded, but I wasn't. Not even close. The mountain was wearing us down, stripping away the walls we'd built. I didn't know how much longer I could keep my feelings buried or if Ethan was hiding something too. The third day tested us. The trail climbed relentlessly, a jagged scar cutting through the mountainside. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. But Ethan pushed forward like he was born for this. Almost there, he called, pointing to a distant ridge where the trail leveled out. His voice was steady, but his eyes kept darting to me, like he was checking for cracks. I was cracking. All right. Every step felt like a countdown to the moment I'd have to tell him. I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in my head. Ethan, I'm in love with you. I've always been. But the words felt like grenades, ready to blow up a decade of friendship. We stopped at a lookout point, the world sprawling below us, miles of forest, peaks, and valleys under a sky so blue it hurt. Ethan leaned against a rock, catching his breath. This is why we do it. Right? He said, gesturing to the view. Makes all the bullshit back home feel small. I nodded, but my bullshit didn't feel small. It felt like an avalanche waiting to bury me. Ethan, I said, my voice shaky. What you said the other night about hiding something. What did you mean? He stiffened, his jaw tightening. Nothing, he said too quickly. Just work stress. You know how it is. I didn't believe him. Not with the way his eyes avoided mine, the way his hands fidgeted with the straps of his pack. But before I could push, a low growl rumbled from the trees. We froze. Bear? I whispered, my heart in my throat. Ethan's hand shot to his knife, his body tense. Stay behind me, he said, his voice low and commanding. The bushes rustled, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought we were done for. Then a deer bolted out, crashing through the underbrush. We laughed, the tension breaking like a snapped branch. But Ethan's hand lingered on my arm, steadying me. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now. Yeah, I said, but my knees were weak, and not from the scare. His touch was too much, too close to what I wanted. I pulled away, muttering something about checking the map. That night, we camped in a small meadow, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen. Ethan was quiet again, staring into the fire like it held answers. I couldn't take it anymore. Ethan, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. What's going on with you? You've been weird this whole trip. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. I could say the same about you. He shot back. You've been jumpy as hell. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. Maybe I've got a reason, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. His brow furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I opened my mouth, the truth teetering on the edge, but fear slammed it shut. Forget it, I muttered, turning away. Luke, don't do that, he said, his voice sharp. Don't shut me out. The irony hit me like a punch. Me shutting him out. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream that I'd been in love with him for years while he lived his perfect, straight life. But I didn't. I just shook my head and crawled into the tent, leaving him by the fire. The next morning, the air was thick with tension. We barely spoke as we packed up, the silence louder than any argument. The trail led us to a narrow canyon, the walls closing in like they were squeezing the truth out of us. At one point, Ethan slipped on loose gravel, and I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Thanks, he said, his voice gruff. He didn't let go of my hand right away, and for a moment, we stood there, inches apart, the world holding its breath. Ethan, I started, my voice trembling, but he cut me off. We need to keep moving, he said, pulling away. Storm's coming. He was right. Dark clouds were rolling in, fast and angry. We hurried to set up camp, but the rain hit before we could finish, soaking us to the bone. Inside the tent, we sat in damp silence, the storm outside mirroring the one between us. I'm sorry, Ethan said finally, his voice barely audible over the rain. For being off. It's not you. Then what is it? I pressed, my heart pounding. He looked at me, his eyes raw, vulnerable. I don't know how to say it, he admitted. But I'm trying. Luke, I'm really trying. The words hit me like a lightning strike. Was he saying what I thought he was? Or was I reading too much into it, desperate for a sign? I didn't know. But the mountain wasn't done with us yet. The storm didn't let up. Rain hammered the tent, the wind screaming through the canyon like it wanted to tear us apart. Ethan and I sat in silence, the air between us thick with unspoken words. His confession, if you could call it that, hung like a ghost, haunting me. By morning, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the trail was a nightmare of mud and loose rocks. We moved carefully, our boots slipping with every step. Ethan was ahead, his movements tense, like he was fighting more than just the terrain. I wanted to ask him what he meant last night, but the words wouldn't come. Around noon, we reached a fork in the trail. The map showed two paths, one safer but longer, the other a shortcut through a steep ravine. Shortcut, Ethan said, his tone decisive. We're behind schedule. I hesitated. The ravine looked treacherous, but Ethan's eyes were hard, daring me to argue. Fine, I said, my stomach twisting. The ravine was worse than I'd feared. The walls towered above us, slick with moss, and the path was barely wide enough for one. Ethan led, his focus razor sharp, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Halfway through, a rock gave way under my foot, and I stumbled, my pack pulling me toward the edge. Luke. Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. He yanked me back, his strength the only thing keeping me from a long fall. For a moment, we stood there, his grip tight, our breaths ragged. You okay? He asked, his voice rough with fear. I nodded, my heart pounding not just from the near fall. His hand lingered on my wrist, his thumb brushing my skin, and I swear time stopped. Thanks, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He let go, but his eyes didn't. Don't scare me like that, he said, softer now. We kept moving, the ravine forcing us closer together. Every brush of his shoulder against mine felt like a spark, igniting the truth I'd buried for years. I couldn't keep doing this pretending, hiding, but telling him could ruin everything. That night, we camped on a small ledge overlooking the ravine. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and endless. Ethan built the fire, his movements deliberate, like he was avoiding me. I couldn't take it anymore. "Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. "What's going on with you? You said you're trying. But trying what?" He froze, his hands still on the firewood. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to do this, Luke," he said, his voice raw. "I've been figuring some shit out. About myself." My heart stopped. "What kind of shit?" I asked, barely breathing. He looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't name: fear, maybe, or hope. "I've always been the guy everyone expects me to be," he said. "The firefighter, the tough guy, the straight guy. But lately, I don't know if that's all I am." The world tilted. Was he saying what I thought he was? I wanted to ask, to demand answers, but my voice failed me. Instead, I just stared, my heart a drum in my chest. "Say something," he said, his voice almost pleading. I swallowed hard, the words fighting to get out. "I've been in love with you for years, Ethan." The silence was deafening. His eyes widened, his breath catching. For a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything. Then he laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound. "Jesus, Luke," he said, "you're gonna kill me." Before I could respond, he leaned forward, his hand cupping my face, and kissed me. It was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters, but then it deepened, desperate and real. The world fell away, the mountain, the fire, everything. It was just us. Finally, after all these years. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my skin. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know it could feel like this." I wanted to laugh, to cry, to kiss him again, but the mountain had other plans. A low rumble echoed through the ravine, the ground trembling beneath us. "Rockslide," Ethan said, his voice sharp. He grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet. "We gotta move. Now." The ground shook, a deep, guttural roar that sent my heart into my throat. Rocks tumbled down the ravine walls, dust choking the air. Ethan's hand was a vice on mine, pulling me toward the trail as the world crumbled around us. "Run," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. We sprinted, our boots slipping on loose gravel, the mountain trying to bury us. A boulder the size of a car crashed down just behind us, the impact vibrating through my bones. Ethan yanked me sideways, shoving me against the ravine wall as smaller rocks rained down. We pressed against the stone, our chests heaving, his body shielding mine. "You okay?" he panted, his eyes scanning me for injuries. I nodded, too shaken to speak. His hand was still on my arm, grounding me, and despite the chaos, all I could think about was that kiss. The rumble faded, leaving an eerie silence. Dust hung in the air, stinging my eyes. "We need to get out of this ravine," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "It's not safe." We moved fast, climbing over debris, the trail barely recognizable. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but Ethan's presence kept me going. He was ahead, checking the path, his focus unshakable. I'd always admired that about him, his ability to stay calm when everything went to hell. By dusk, we reached safer ground, a wide plateau with a view of the valley below. We collapsed, exhausted, our clothes caked with dirt. Ethan sat close, his shoulder brushing mine, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. "That was too close," he said, his voice low. He looked at me, his eyes soft, vulnerable. I thought I was going to lose you. My heart skipped. You didn't, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You won't. He smiled, a small, shaky thing, and reached for my hand. His fingers laced through mine, warm and sure. About earlier, he said, his thumb brushing my knuckles. I meant it. The kiss. I've been feeling this for a while. Luke. I just didn't know what it was. I stared at him, my chest tight with hope and fear. You're not straight, I said, half question, half statement. He laughed, a raw, honest sound. Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. He paused, his eyes searching mine. Is that okay? I wanted to laugh, to cry, to kiss him again. More than okay, I said, squeezing his hand. We sat there, hand in hand, the mountain silent around us. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like the weight I'd carried for years was lifting. But the trail wasn't done with us. The next morning, we woke to a sky heavy with clouds. The air was thick, electric, like another storm was brewing. We packed quickly, our movements synced, but there was a new energy between us, tentative, hopeful. Every glance, every touch, felt like a promise. The trail led us to a high pass, the wind biting as we climbed. Ethan was quieter now, but his smiles were warmer, his touches deliberate. At one point, he stopped to adjust my pack, his hands lingering on my shoulders. You're carrying too much, he said, his voice soft. So are you, I shot back, and he laughed, the sound easing the ache in my chest. By midday, we reached a narrow bridge over a rushing river, the water churning white below. The bridge was old, wooden, swaying in the wind. Ethan went first, testing each step, his focus razor sharp. I followed, my heart pounding not just from the height. Halfway across, a plank snapped under Ethan's foot. He caught himself, gripping the ropes, but my stomach dropped. Ethan, I shouted, lunging forward. I'm fine, he called, his voice steady. He turned, flashing a grin. You worry too much, Luke. I glared, but my relief was overwhelming. We made it across, collapsing on the other side, our laughter shaky. You're going to give me a heart attack, I said, shoving his shoulder. He grabbed my hand, pulling me close. Not a chance, he said, his voice low. Then he kissed me again, quick but fierce, like he was staking a claim. The mountain had nearly killed us, but it had also brought us here. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. The trail grew kinder after the bridge, winding through meadows dotted with wildflowers. The air was crisp, the sky a patchwork of clouds and sun. Ethan and I walked closer now, our shoulders brushing, our hands finding each other's without pretense. It was new, fragile, but it felt right like the mountain had carved out a space for us. We talked more that day, really talked. Ethan told me about the doubts he'd buried for years, the pressure to be the perfect son, the tough firefighter. I always thought I had to be one thing, he said, his voice low as we rested by a stream. But being here, with you, it's like I can be something else. I told him about my own fears coming out in high school, the loneliness of loving someone I thought I could never have. I was so scared of losing you, I admitted, my voice cracking. You're my best friend, Ethan. That's always been enough. He looked at me, his eyes soft. It's not enough for me anymore, he said, and my heart stopped. He leaned in, kissing me softly, his hand warm against my cheek. It wasn't rushed or desperate like before, it was sure. Like he'd made up his mind. That night, we camped under a canopy of stars, the fire crackling softly. Ethan sat close, his arm around my shoulders. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was hiding. We laughed, shared stories, and when he kissed me again, it felt like coming home. But the mountain wasn't done testing us. The next morning, we woke to find our food bag torn open, scattered across the campsite. "Bear," Ethan said, his voice tight as he examined the claw marks. My stomach sank. We were days from the trailhead, with barely enough supplies to last. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice shaky. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We ration what's left and move fast. There's a ranger station a day's hike from here. We can make it." We packed up, the weight of our situation settling in. The trail was unforgiving, climbing steeply through rocky terrain. Hunger gnawed at us, but Ethan kept us moving, his determination a lifeline. "We're tougher than this," he said, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. By afternoon, we reached a high ridge, the wind howling around us. Ethan stopped suddenly, pointing to fresh tracks in the dirt. "Bear," he said again, his voice low. "Close." My heart raced. "What now?" "We stay calm," he said, his hand on my arm. "Make noise. Keep moving. It'll avoid us." We sang off-key, shouted random nonsense. Anything to keep the bear at bay. It worked. No sign of the animal, but the fear lingered, sharpening our senses. Ethan stayed close, his presence steadying me. "I've got you," he said at one point, his voice firm. "Always will." Those words carried me through the day. By dusk, we reached the ranger station, a small cabin tucked in a clearing. It was empty, but stocked with emergency supplies, canned food, blankets, a radio. We collapsed inside, exhausted but alive. As we ate, Ethan reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. I meant what I said, he told me, his eyes steady. "I've got you, Luke. No matter what." I believed him. For the first time, I really believed him. But as we settled in for the night, the radio crackled to life, a ranger's voice cutting through the static. "Storm warning," it said. "Worst one in years. Stay put." Ethan and I exchanged a look. The mountain wasn't done with us yet. The storm hit like a freight train, wind rattling the cabin's windows, rain pounding the roof. Ethan and I huddled inside, the radio our only link to the outside world. The ranger's voice crackled again, warning of flash floods and landslides. "Stay where you are," he said. "Help's coming when it clears." Ethan's hand found mine under the blanket, his grip tight. "We're okay," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "We've got this." I wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at me. The mountain had already thrown so much at us, rock slides, bears, my own buried feelings. Now it was testing us again, trapping us in this tiny cabin with nowhere to run. We spent the day talking, really talking. Ethan opened up about his family, his dad's expectations, his mom's quiet disappointment when he didn't settle down with a nice girl. "I never questioned it," he said, staring at the fire we'd built in the cabin's small hearth. "I just did what they wanted. But being here, with you, it's like I'm finally seeing myself." I told him about my own struggles coming out to my parents, the friends who drifted away, the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever be enough. "You were always enough for me," I said, my voice thick, "even when I thought you'd never feel the same." He looked at me, his eyes bright with something new. "I do," He said simply, "I love you, Luke." The words hit me like a wave, washing away years of doubt. I kissed him, hard and desperate, the storm outside fading to nothing. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. No more secrets, no more walls. But the storm wasn't done. By evening, water started seeping under the door, cold and relentless. "Shit," Ethan muttered, grabbing towels to block it. "This place is gonna flood." We worked fast, moving supplies to higher shelves, barricading the door with anything we could find. The water kept coming, pooling at our feet. "We can't stay here," Ethan said, his voice grim. "The river's too close. If it overflows, we're screwed." He was right. The cabin was near a stream that was likely swelling into a torrent. "There's a higher trail," I said, remembering the map. "It's a climb, but it's safer." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "We move at first light. For now, we hold out." We spent the night keeping watch, the storm's roar a constant reminder of our fragility. Ethan held me close, his arms a shield against the chaos. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we're in this together." Dawn broke gray and angry, the rain still falling but lighter. We packed what we could, our clothes damp, our bodies aching. The trail to higher ground was steep, slick with mud, but Ethan led the way, his strength pulling me through. Halfway up, we heard a deep, rumbling roar. The river had overflowed, a wall of water tearing through the valley below. The cabin was gone, swallowed by the flood. "Holy shit," Ethan breathed, his hand tight on mine. We made it. We climbed higher, the trail leveling out onto a rocky outcrop. The storm was easing, the clouds parting to reveal patches of blue. We collapsed, exhausted, our hands still clasped. "I love you," I said, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting forever. Ethan smiled, his eyes crinkling. "I love you too, Luke. Always will." The mountain had tried to break us, but it had only made us stronger. We weren't out of danger yet, but for the first time, I felt like we could face anything as long as we were together. The final day was quiet, the mountain subdued after its tantrum. The trail wound gently now, leading us toward the trailhead where we'd started a lifetime ago. Ethan and I walked side by side, our hands brushing, our smiles easy. The weight of the past week rock slides, storms, confessions had changed us, forged something new. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Every glance, every touch, said enough. I'd spent years hiding my love for him, afraid it would ruin us. Now, it was the thing holding us together. By noon, we reached a clearing with a view of the valley below. The flood's damage was visible, trees uprooted, earth scarred, but the sky was clear, the sun warm. Ethan dropped his pack, pulling me into his arms. "We made it," he said, his voice thick with relief. I laughed, resting my forehead against his. "Barely." He kissed me, slow and sure, like we had all the time in the world. "Worth it," he murmured, his lips brushing mine. We sat there for a while, sharing the last of our rations, talking about what came next. Ethan was nervous about telling his family, his coworkers. "They won't get it," he said, his brow furrowed. "Not at first. But I don't care. I'm done pretending." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "You don't have to do it alone," I said. "I'm here." He smiled, the kind that lit up his whole face. "I know." The trailhead came into view by late afternoon, a gravel lot with our beat-up truck waiting. We stood there, reluctant to leave the mountain behind. It had nearly killed us, but it had also given us phthisis. Together, no more secrets. As we drove back to Denver, the Rockies fading in the rearview, Ethan reached for my hand. "This is just the start, right?" he asked, his voice soft but sure. "Yeah," I said, my chest tight with hope. "Just the start." Back home, life wasn't easy. Ethan told his family, and it was messy. His dad didn't speak to him for weeks. His mom cried but hugged him. My parents were thrilled, though they teased me for keeping it a secret so long. Work was tough too. Ethan faced whispers at the firehouse, and I dealt with clients who didn't understand. But we faced it together, our hands clasped, our love a shield. The mountain had taught us something. Love, real love, is worth fighting for. It's messy, terrifying, and sometimes it takes a near-death experience to see it clearly. But when you find it, you hold on, no matter what the world throws at you. Years later, we'd go back to Silverthorne Pass. Older, wiser, our hands still finding each other's on the trail. The mountain was still there, wild and unforgiving, but so were Wetwell men who'd faced the worst and come out stronger. And as we stood at the same lookout where Ethan first kissed me, the wind whispering through the pines, I knew we'd be okay. Not because life was easy, but because we had each other. Forever.